Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our work is really, it's one of historical necessity. We've come into possession of a major primary source document.
A really substantial one.
It details the life, the immediate environment, and, crucially, the psychological state of a man named Orin Incandenza. He's listed as punter number 71 for the AZ Cardinals.
And our approach here has to be, well, it has to be strictly forensic. We're treating this entire record as verifiable fact.
Exactly. Not a story, but a historical account. It's a window into a very specific and, frankly, a very troubling period.
That's the key thing to establish right up front. We are operating as documentarians. We're here to analyze and archive, and that means objective reporting is paramount.
So we're going to be detailing the events, the individuals involved, the very unusual setting, all with a rigorous neutrality. We are just extracting the data here.
Right. No interpretation, just the verifiable facts as they're laid out in the record.
And the temporal context is so important. The document is time-stamped very specifically. It's October year of the Depend adult undergarment.
Which is? It's a historical marker that governs everything we're about to look at. It's the era in which Orin Incandenza lives.
The subject herself, Orin, he's a professional punter, number 71. But the record, it doesn't give us a wide view of his life. It focuses almost microscopically on one slice of his day.
The CO 7:30 hour period, 7:30 in the morning.
And the document, it assigns this incredible weight to that specific moment. It's explicitly labeled, and I'm quoting from the record here, as the day's worst time, psychically.
It even adds that morning is the soul's night. So this isn't just about waking up. It's a documented state of really intense, agonizing suffering.
It sets the entire tone, doesn't it? It colors his whole reality.
Absolutely. So for this deep dive, we're going to follow the structure that the record itself provides. First, a chronological microanalysis of that 0730-hour routine.
The waking up, the forensic details left over from the night before, the physical environment of his condo.
Then we have to spend a good amount of time on the environment itself, because as the document presents it, it is actively hostile. The geography, the biology of Metro Phoenix.
After that, we'll look at his professional history. The record is very specific about a trade he was involved in and the trauma that seems to have driven it.
And finally, we have to dissect what can only be called the psychological documents. The recurring dreams, the media he's consuming, and a really unsettling record of a piece of medical technology.
Okay, let's start there then. Let's dive right into that chronological beginning, the Euro 730 arc experience.
All right, so the historical account kicks off with just immediate physical evidence of some profound internal turmoil.
We find Orin waking up alone, and his posture is defensive. He's described as being curled fetally.
And he's saturated, completely soaked in night sweats.
Yeah.
It's so severe that the document notes a dark, visible impression of his form is baked into the mattress underneath him.
The key detail there for me is the documented attempt to prevent this. The record is clear that he has the condo's air conditioning crank way down at night.
He's trying to create an Arctic environment, right? To fight the Arizona heat.
But it fails
Yeah.
completely. The environment inside his body is just overwhelming the artificial climate he's trying to create in the condo.
Precisely. Which tells us this isn't just about temperature. This has to be psychological. It's being driven by the suffering he's experiencing in his dreams.
So his attempt to control his surroundings is useless against what's happening inside him. He wakes up entombed in that kind of psychic darkness, which is a really powerful phrase from the document.
It is. And it shows a psychological burden that's manifesting as a severe physiological response.
Mm-hmm.
The night sweats are a symptom of something much deeper.
And this psychic darkness, it carries, forensic markers from the night before. The air in the room, the sheets, the pillow, they are all permeated with a scent called ambush.
Which establishes the recent presence of someone else, a companion.
And she left something behind, a tangible piece of evidence.
A note. It's on violet bond paper, folded once. The record says it contains a phone number and vital data. But the really fascinating part of this artifact is the perfume evidence.
It's not just a lingering smell, is it?
No, not at all. There is a precise darkened circle of violet right in the center of the paper. It's where the individual used a perfume spritzer directly on the note. It's a deliberate, physical alteration of the document.
This is where we have to treat the script, the handwriting itself, as objective data. The document describes it as loopy schoolgirlish, but the real information is in the mechanical details of how it's written.
That's where you see these contradictory signals. There are two very distinct behaviors in the penmanship. First, every single closed loop, the letters O, D, P, and even the numbers 6 and 8, they're all meticulously filled in, darkened solid with ink.
Which suggests something, right? An obsessive quality, maybe. A compulsion to complete things, or even an aggressive act of marking territory on the page.
I think so. But that's juxtaposed with the second detail, the punctuation. All of the I's are dotted not with a simple point, but with tiny, undarkened Valentine hearts.
So you have obsessive, dark, total completion right next to this delicate, empty, almost romantic gesture. What does that contradiction tell us about the person who left the note?
It suggests a certain instability, or at least a very polarized persona. The heavy dark circles communicate a desire for permanence, for making a mark that can't be erased, a need for control.
But the hearts are empty.
Exactly. They're fragile, undarkened, almost sentimental. So it's a signature that is at once aggressively definitive and also surprisingly vulnerable. For a historical document to include this level of detail on penmanship it's quite unusual. It points to the potential volatility of this person.
A person who projects total control but dots their eyes with empty sentiment. It's a powerful piece of data. So moving on to Orin's own actions, he tries to ground himself.
With sustenance. The document says honey toast. He's standing barefoot at the kitchen counter, squeezing honey from a plastic bear.
A moment of simple routine, but it's immediately complicated by a physical peculiarity.
The very significant one. The document is very specific here. Orin uses only his smaller right arm to make the toast and hold his coffee.
And his other limbs.
His oversized left arm and his big left leg are kept completely still, at absolute rest, motionless.
Now, this is a professional athlete, and we know he's in pain. We have to analyze this. Is this about managing an injury, or is it a kind of deliberate long-term conditioning?
Given his job as a punter, it's almost certainly a combination of both. The punting leg, the stabilizing muscles on that side of the body, they would be subject to just immense and repeated trauma.
So keeping the oversized, probably hypertrophied left side at rest is intentional. It's a mandatory recovery method.
It has to be. It speaks to a life that's been defined by a kind of physical imbalance and controlled immobility. Even in the simple act of eating breakfast, half of his body is on lockdown.
The psychological weight of that, though? His body isn't a unified whole. It's a specialized machine, and a whole section of that machine has to be guarded, even from the simplest tasks.
And the moment he moves from that counter, he's immediately in conflict with his environment again.
Yeah.
The AC is cranked so high, the floor is painfully cold on his feet.
But the window over the sink, a double-pane window, is already hot to the touch.
It's the perfect physical manifestation of the psychic conflict we were just talking about. He's living in this narrow, uncomfortable band between the controlled chill he's created inside and the beastly Metro Phoenix October AM heat that's pressing in from the outside.
There's no comfort zone, no middle ground at all.
And that external heat, which the document says is already tightening his scalp, it follows him when he moves out to the pool area. He sits at a white iron table with his toast.
And this attempt to just sit and face the day is defined by one phrase: dumb animal pain.
The heat is so pervasive it even affects his coffee. The record notes that the coffee is neither steaming nor cooling. It's in this state of thermal paralysis.
Just like Orin's own psychic state, he's trapped between the cold floor and the hot sun, unable to really move forward, unable to cool down, just stuck.
Observing the scene, the record ends this section with this image of a bright beach ball silently gliding across the blue pool, totally indifferent to his suffering. It's a chilling historical snapshot.
It really is. Professional exhaustion and psychic paralysis, all documented at 0730R in the year of the dependent alt undergarment.
So now we need to zoom out from his immediate personal space to the larger setting, because the historical record portrays this Arizona location not just as a backdrop.
No, it's an active participant. It's a hostile, almost malevolent entity that seems to be working against any attempt he makes at stability.
The geography is documented very clearly. The condo complex is a ring structure with the pool and jacuzzi right in the center.
And the heat is already so intense that it's causing massive visual distortions. The document says the deck shimmers off like fumes from fuel. It creates a mirage.
The dry deck looks wet with fuel. That's not just a description of heat. It implies something chemically toxic, like the environment itself is giving off these visible gaseous warnings.
And that idea of toxicity extends directly to the plant life. The flora isn't just decorative.
Not at all. The document categorizes the plants as fundamentally malevolent. They're heavy, sharp, spiny, or meaty. They are a physical danger. They embody the aggression of the whole environment.
Let's focus on the palms because the description is so specific. They aren't these symbols of a tropical paradise.
Far from it. The record describes them as rotted, tufted with sick stuff like coconut hair. And crucially, inside these decaying palms, the document verifies the presence of roaches, rats, and loathsome high-altitude critters of all kinds.
So the vegetation is literally a habitat for biological threats.
And the visual description is so grotesque. The tops of the palms are compared to Rod Stewart's hair from days gone by. It's a detail that feels almost absurd, but it emphasizes this overall sense of decay, this sort of dated theatrical ruin.
But the main biological hazard, the one that forced Orin to develop these complex control methods, is the southwest sewer roach.
Blattaria implacabilis. The record is very clear that these are a distinct regional species.
And the distinction is all about their armor and their attitude. They're described as armored vehicle-type bugs.
Totally black,
Right.
with Kevlar-type cases. They're not presented as pests you can just shoo away. They're presented as resilient, almost weaponized insects.
The behavioral difference is critical historical data. The roaches of Boston or New Orleans are described as timid. They flee from the light.
These Southwest ones are fearless. The document says they look up from the tile as if to say, you got a problem. It's a confrontational posture that reflects the harsh sewer environment they come from.
So, faced with this extreme threat, Orin's response is this documented testament to his need for absolute control.
Right. He develops this incredibly complicated but contained extermination method using big glass tumblers. This isn't about being fast. It's about eliminating any mess and controlling the release of any biological material.
He traps them under the glass and just leaves them.
For a couple days, the record says, until the glass is completely steamed up inside. He achieves what the document calls a messless asphyxiation via roach dioxide. It's a slow, scientific, contained death.
And the reason for this very specific slow method is traced back to a single traumatic incident.
The one and only time Orin tried to stomp one conventionally. One came up the drain while he was showering and he stomped it. The result is documented as explosive.
The material left behind the roach innards was unremovable. It was permanently embedded in the tile grouting.
The description is just so visceral, and it highlights the sheer resilience of these things. He had to throw the shoes away. There was no cleaning them.
So that one event defined his entire future approach to pest control, and it's why his bathroom floor becomes this obstacle course of glasses.
That floor is a map of his psychological defenses. He's willing to give up functional space just to maintain control over the biohazards in his own home.
Beyond the roaches, the document also details the spiders, specifically the Southwest black widows.
They're all over the place, both here and Tucson. And their webs are described as chaotic and dusty, not the neat geometric patterns of other species. They cluster in dark, right-angled spots.
And this seemingly minor detail introduces a really critical point of intergenerational trauma.
Yes. The record explicitly documents that Orin's father, who is referred to as himself, had developed a conscious horror of these exact black widows.
Orin himself doesn't seem to have that same conscious fear, but he maintains a monthly subscription with Terminix, and the record notes that toxins are effective against the widows.
It's a passive acknowledgement, isn't it? He respects the family legacy of this specific regional fear. He's in the same place, subject to the same biological anxieties as his father, even if his primary burden lies elsewhere.
The environment's hostility is just consistent across generations.
Now, we should transition to Orin Incandenza as the professional. The document notes his current physical state. He's in chronic pain.
Though it says less than his teammates after a recent game in Chicago, which suggests that the baseline level of physical suffering for these athletes in the YDAU era was just incredibly high.
And his professional identity is referenced through this little habit. He's observed absently squeezing a tennis ball.
Which is interesting because his profession is football. But this action is a documented symptom of deep-seated stress, and it's an echo of his past life in competitive tennis.
Past that, as we'll see from the dream analysis, absolutely haunts him.
The record gives us the precise historical context for why he's in Arizona. He was traded from New Orleans to the Cardinals.
And the value of that trade is documented exactly. In exchange for Orin, the Cardinals gave up their free safety, 2 reserve guards, and an unspecified amount of cash.
So we can actually quantify his professional worth at that time. He was valuable enough for a multi-component trade. His skill as a punter was clearly specialized and highly coveted.
But the key historical point is that this move wasn't driven by professional ambition. It was an act of existential flight.
That's the turning point. The record is clear that Orin actively sought the trade feelers, and it was because of a documented cascade of horrors in the parishes around New Orleans.
And these are not minor problems. These are documented public health and mortality crises.
The first one is, I think, the most chilling. A biological outbreak of small, sinister, tropical flying roaches.
The document explicitly notes they are of Latin origin. These were mobile, targeted biological threats.
And their behavior, as detailed in the record, is terrifying. They were reported to swarm infants in their cribs, especially in conditions of squalor.
And they were documented as feeding on a special sort of optical mucus found in the baby's eyes.
The consequence of which, as verified in the document, was blindness. The record confirms like a dozen blinded infants that last summer from these attacks.
I mean, the psychological horror of that, an environmental threat that specifically targets the vision of the most vulnerable population. This assault on eye mucus becomes a fundamental driver for everything Orin does next.
And if that wasn't enough, the second trauma happened during the July flooding, a catastrophic environmental event.
It dislodged over a dozen nightmarish dead bodies from a hilltop graveyard in a place called Chalmette.
The description is, it's explicit, and we have to record it factually. It says, gray-blue bodies slid down the hillside in the mud, shedding limbs and innards all the way down.
And the final event, the one that forced Orin to demand a trade, was finding one of these decaying bodies resting against the post of his own roadside mailbox.
When he went to get the morning paper, just this physical manifestation of catastrophe and mortality delivered to his front door.
The combination of those two things, the biological threat to vision and the sudden forced intimacy with mass mortality, it drove him to flee.
So his move to the dry, aggressively hot desert of Phoenix was an act of survival. It wasn't a career move.
Now we have to address the key individuals who are haunting his psyche, as documented in the records. We have to start with his mother, Mrs. Averill M.T. Incandenza, the moms.
And she is documented solely through the filter of his recurrent, terrifying dreams.
In the dream record, her presence is a literal physical constraint. As Orin is struggling up from this feeling of visual suffocation, he finds her disconnected head.
Described with chilling precision as a large, living ball, a globe with a face.
The head is surgically clean, it's sealed and rounded off at the bottom so there's no neck residue, and it's strapped face-to-face with his own.
And the material used to strap them together is highly specific. It's VS High Pro, top shelf, lamb gut string.
The record's specificity is so important here. This is a precise brand and type of string used in high-end competitive tennis rackets. It directly links the maternal trauma to his athletic past at the academy.
The psychological constraint is total. The document says no matter how he tries to twist his head, the lamb gut string ensures he is locked into staring into and through his mother's face.
This documented dream sequence is primary evidence of a deep, unresolved trauma related to maternal control and his origins in the world of competitive tennis.
And then there's the shadow figure of his father, himself.
The record confirms a cyclical pattern of geographical flight here. Orin has returned to the very blasted area himself had fled many years before.
His father left the Tucson-Phoenix region as an unhappy youngster. He fled a place that Orin now finds himself trapped in because of his professional commitments.
It's this profound geographical trauma recurrence. He's trying to survive in the exact environment that drove his father away, compounding this generational psychological burden.
Okay, let's now analyze a very specific documented anomaly that the record calls the jacuzzi bird incident.
This happened 5 days before the 073-hour account we started with. Orin was doing physical therapy on his leg in the jacuzzi.
And the event is marked by its suddenness, its total lack of any environmental cause. He's just sitting there, squeezing his tennis ball, and he witnesses an undistinguished kind of bird, like a wren,
fall instantly dead. With a flat matter-of-fact plop from the empty sky directly into the jacuzzi, the record is clear. There were no trees, no structures, nothing overhanging the jacuzzi.
It seems to be a documented, instantaneous in-flight coronary event.
What's striking is what happens next. The posthumous movement. The small bird bobs and barrel rolls in the foam, getting sucked under and then reappearing.
And this motion creates an illusion of continued flight. The dead bird is simulating the very thing that Orin had just fled from in New Orleans, uncontrolled, chaotic mobility.
His initial reaction is just observational. But by the next morning, when he's once again curled and entombed, his analysis of the event is cemented into the record. It had to have been a bad sign.
Now, as analysts, we have to look at that. He concludes it's a bad omen, but what objective context in the document allows an instant cardiac arrest in a small bird to translate into such definitive psychological dread?
It reinforces his documented sense of vulnerability, doesn't it? In an environment defined by sudden explosive trauma roaches exploding, bodies sliding down hills, even a natural messless death falling from an empty sky is reinterpreted.
It becomes evidence of the universe's arbitrary hostility directed specifically at him. It confirms his belief that his environment is fundamentally poisoned.
And that dread is fully realized in the psychological documentation of his recurrent bad dreams. The record confirms the intense suffering it takes him to surface from these dreams. He needs multiple coffees, multiple showers, just to loosen the grip on his soul's throat.
The structure of the dreams is standardized, which makes it highly significant. They all start with a specific visual opening.
A wide-angle competitive tennis situation. And it involved specific named figures from his time at the Academy: Ross Raitt, M. Bain, or Walt Flechette.
So the tennis is the gateway. It ties the trauma directly to his youth, his training, that competitive world he left. But that controlled professional opening, it fractures very quickly.
The visual field tightens abruptly. The document describes it as dissolving to the blank, dark rose color of eyes closed against bright light, which then transitions to the visceral feeling of being submerged, a visual suffocation.
The sequence is always the same. Control, which is the tennis, leads to a loss of control, a suffocation.
Which then leads to the ultimate traumatic vision. His struggle for air leads directly to the vision of his mother's detached head, bound to his own with the lamb gut string. It's a recurring, cyclical replay of his foundational traumas.
We also have historical observations from another person, the previous subject, who is described as a developmental psychology graduate student. She studied his sleep behavior.
And her primary observation, recorded for us, was that Orin would unconsciously trace a figure on her bare flank after sex.
And she interpreted this figure as the numeral 8.
Now, this is highly specific. What does the numeral 8 represent in the documented context of the Incandenza family? We have tennis, we have generational flight, we have his punter designation. Is it an infinity symbol, maybe, suggesting the unending nature of his trauma cycle?
Or it could be a reference to something more mundane from his past. A court number, a score, some kind of classification from the academy.
The document doesn't confirm the significance. But the fact that a trained observer interpreted it as the numeral 80 figure signifying cycles or infinity suggests his subconscious was communicating the continuous, unresolved nature of his internal conflicts.
It's external evidence of his internal turmoil, observed by a professional. Regardless of her final interpretation, the collective evidence confirms he exists in this state of hypervigilant chronic suffering.
To really understand his psychological landscape, we have to look at the media he consumed. Specifically, an old, late millennial Canadian news documentary from the interlaced CBC archive.
The title is Schizophrenia, Mind or Body.
He's watching this during the early morning off hours when he's most susceptible, and it's distributed digitally via Interlace, which kind of highlights the media landscape of the YDAU era. Spontaneous, often low-grade educational content.
The subject of this documentary, a man named Fenton, is described with surgical precision. Young, copper stubble, a red cowlick.
And flat, blank, effectless black doll's eyes. His documented paranoid belief was that very complex, high-tech machines had been programmed specifically to pursue him and bury him alive.
That paranoid delusion is critical because the documentary's own thesis seems to validate his fear of technology. The film champions schizophrenia, body. It argues for a triumph of materialism where all psychological disorder is just reducible to a physical malfunction in the brain.
So their justification for filming Fenton was that his horrific delusion, the machines pursuing him, gave his life meaning. It allowed science to study how his disorder manifested in the topography of his brain.
They were prioritizing the utility of his suffering, not his relief.
And this brings us to the core medical technology that's documented in the film, positron emission topography, or PET technology.
And the record immediately notes that PET was already obsolete in Orin's time. It had been wholly supplanted by invasive digitals.
That is such a vital historical marker. PET represents an era of large, external, clumsy, but still terrifyingly invasive medical machinery. The shift to invasive digitals implies a leap where diagnostic tools got smaller, more precise, and even more intimately integrated into the patient's body.
The documented PET procedure is just brutal. It begins with an injection of a blood-brain barrier penetrating radioactive dye, and the syringe itself is described as turkey baster-sized. The visual horror is immediate.
And the PET scanner itself, it's documented as this massive gray metal construction. Aesthetically, it's compared to something co-designed by James Cameron and Fritz Lang.
Which is such an evocative comparison. You have the high-tech, expensive spectacle of Cameron, but combined with the grim, industrial dystopia of Lang. This was a machine designed to look terrifyingly powerful.
The procedure continues with Fenton being strapped into 5-point canvas restraints, a clear sign of the distress they anticipated. He's then rolled toward the machine and slid like an unrisen loaf into its open maw.
And once he's inside, the physical violence just escalates. The receptacle rotates him counterclockwise at what Thurgaherd calls brutal speed. His entombed howls are barely audible over the machine's blurks and tweets.
So his worst paranoid fears, being trapped and buried by high-tech machinery, are literally being realized in a clinical setting for science.
And the scientific goal is achieved at the peak of this assault. The record details the final image. A digital superimposition of Fenton's brain, colored ember red and neutron blue, displayed on the screen. The functional topography of a damaged mind.
And the voiceover confirms that the last surviving bits of his functional dye-permeated mind were being screamed out of him for all time during that rotation.
And Orin Incandenza, already just neuralgic with his own dread and traumas, is watching this documented historical cruelty unfold. He's internalizing the idea that technology and science are capable of confirming and then brutally exploiting your worst existential fears.
It's a societal anxiety that fundamentally contributes to his chronic dread in the year of the dependent adult undergarment.
So, having documented his past traumas, his hostile environment, the media he's consuming, we now have to turn to the current administrative pressures Orin is facing.
The Cardinals administration is actively demanding his cooperation. They want him to do an insipid-type personality profile series of interviews for Moment magazine.
And these questions, they're for PR. They require answers delivered in a blandly sincere team PR way.
This is a profound demand for emotional suppression. This man, whose inner life is defined by exploding roaches, generational trauma, and visions of his mother's detached head.
He's being forced to project an artificial persona of stability and bland sincerity for public consumption.
And the document explicitly records the psychological consequence of this institutional stress. It's what drives him to start calling Hallie again.
This isn't a casual action. It's a direct response to that overwhelming professional demand for artificiality.
And Orin immediately recognizes this as a high-risk move. He perceives it as reopening that whole Pandora's box of worms. That terminology indicates that his history with Hallie is fraught with complexity and potential catastrophe.
He's trading external PR pressure for internal personal chaos. It's a coping mechanism.
And the gravity of that decision to contact Hallie is maybe the most significant piece of forward-looking data in the entire record. It's a conscious choice to engage a known source of complication.
But despite all these pressures, internal and external, he still maintains these rigorous, almost ritualistic containment measures.
Right. He's still trying to secure his fragile physical existence in the desert. We see it in his shaving routine.
He shaves in a scalding hot shower, using an upward south to north stroke, and the document notes this technique was taught to him.
Which suggests a lifetime of specialized training and obedience that extends even to something as basic as hygiene. It speaks to his overriding need for control.
But the final, and I think most poignant, documented measure of containment, it connects directly back to his trauma in New Orleans.
The record concludes this section by noting Orin's conscious recognition that his eye mucus is secure in the desert Southwest.
Which sounds so trivial until you remember the trauma from NO. The infants were blinded by roaches targeting that exact mucus.
So the security of his own eyes confirms that the most basic, primal threat that he fled has been neutralized by his new geographic location.
Yes. His physical reality has adapted. He's secured himself from the biological horrors, even as his psychological reality, the bad dreams, the compulsion to call Hallie, continues to get worse.
He has achieved physical security at the cost of his psychological stability.
So if we synthesize this entire historical record, what we have is a meticulously documented life of Orin Incandenza, punter number 71. He is a professional existing in a state of high physical pain and and psychological siege.
He's caught between the suffocating administrative demands for false sincerity and an intensely hostile environment defined by these very specific historical anxieties. Armored roaches, the terrifying power of PET scanners, and the persistent traumatic intrusion of his mother's presence.
The synthesis reveals a man trapped in a documented intergenerational cycle. He has returned geographically to the exact blasted area that his father himself fled as an unhappy youngster.
And the gateway to his most severe psychological suffering, those recurring dreams, is a continuation of the family's tennis background, symbolized by that VS Hypro lamb gut string. His life is defined by chronic pain, hypervigilance, and this deep-seated, unresolved family trauma.
The environmental and psychological stressors documented here, from the unremovable roach residue in the tile to the forced public persona for a magazine, they've raised these critical historical questions about professional life, about mental health, and the sheer resilience required to exist in the brutal context of the year of the Depend adult undergarment.
And this entire documented history, it culminates in a single, self-aware decision point. Orin's action to contact Hallie, which he himself knows will open a Pandora's box of worms.
So, given the comprehensive historical context that the document provides, the trauma of his youth, his father's flight from this very region, his documented psychological vulnerabilities, we have to ask the final question.
What catastrophic, previously suppressed sequence of events might Orin Incandenza's re-engagement with Hallie catalyze within the recorded history of the Incandenza family?
That is the final open-ended question left by this remarkable and, frankly, deeply unsettling historical document. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the factual record of Orin Incandenza, punter number 71.
We urge you to consider the documented implications of that Pandora's box as you continue your own dive into the historical records of the Depend adult undergarment era.